You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And of course, as usual, as always, we are your hosts for this show, and tonight's no different. We're still your hosts. So this is kind of an interesting thing that we got going on today. We recently ran across an article. I want to get this right. It's on CBR.com. Always give credit where credit is due. But basically, they wrote this article that you and I, of course, thought was interesting, where it was essentially outlining 10 things that we need to see from a potential season 2 of Obi Wan Kenobi. And I remember you and I had talked about this for quite some time, actually, where if they did do a season 2, where are they going to go with it? What's going to happen? And, right. I mean, we even sort of did this a little bit where we said, okay, well, here's some things that they should do. Or maybe some things that they shouldn't do. And, I don't know, we kind of had that conversation a little bit. We even on the air, right? Like, on this very show, when we were talking about it, particularly when we were reviewing it, I think towards the last few episodes, we started saying things like, well, you know, if they do a season 2, they should do X, Y, and Z. Well, you know, here we are, and, I mean, how likely do you think it is that they're even going to do a season 2?
I think they're going to try to do a season 2 because of the success of the show.
Yeah, money does talk.
You know, do I think they need to? Not really.
Yeah, you know, that's...
I think I got everything I need to know at this point. And I think if you do it, you'll be forcing a bunch of stuff that could, one, convolute or, you know, completely kind of discredit the whole New Hope film. Or it's just like, okay, now you're just trying, because you have this greenlit and it's going, now you're just kind of forcing us to kind of watch these stories that really don't have any real value to us, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the fence.
The premise of it, I think the premise of what we got in Kenobi, in the Obi Wan Kenobi series, I think we got it. Like, what else do we really need to know at this point?
Well, and again, you know, I can see this both ways, as is so often the case in Star Wars.
Well, so often the case, actually, from the beginning, because remember, you felt the same way before season 1, because you're like, well, I can see what you're saying, but, you know, you made a case of, you know, why we do need to see it. But
well,
you also understand why we didn't need at the same time.
Are you talking about season 2, or are you talking about the show in general?
The show in general. When we first heard that they were trying to do a whole Kenobi thing, and I was like, you know, vehemently against it.
Yeah, it was pretty adamant. I remember it kind of got heated on one or two of the shows. I remember this is back, of course, when it was like the whole thing might have been a movie, right? So it could have been like, okay, they were thinking of doing a Obi Wan Kenobi movie, and I remember the discussion at that point was, is it going to be just a single film, or is it going to be a trilogy? And I remember that's when we started to, because at first, you know, when we were talking about it, he just kind of went along with it, whatever. But it was almost, I don't know if it was because it was starting to move into the realm of possibility, but something basically triggered you. And, you know, you just basically went off on this whole tangent about, you know, why this is stupid and we don't need it. And you can't even imagine what it could be. And it's like, what are we going to do? Watch them just sitting there watching? I mean, it was actually kind of funny. I mean, honestly, if you go back to some of those older shows, it was pretty hilarious.
Oh, man.
And then I remember even because around that same time, this is probably like a couple of years ago or something, they did this standalone Obi Wan comic that was a little bit closer to episode 4. We're probably talking around the Rogue One period, maybe. And I remember bringing up to you that after reading that, because it was like a limited series, it was like 5 or 6 issues or something. And it was funny because they basically had all these really cool stories. And I remember bringing that up to you. And I remember your response that you came back quite, shall we just say, passionately. That it's like, all right, that's all well and good, but we could just have that in a comic or a book. We don't need to see this in a movie. And then, of course, when they did a series, I don't know, it was weird because by that time, I remember over time you were softening your stance on it. Like it was still one of those things that you didn't think that we needed, but you weren't at the point yet where you were excited about it, or you were at least curious. It was kind of before you reached that point.
Yeah, it was more out of curiosity. Because I'm just kind of like, what story are you really going to tell? Because it's like, all right, well, Luke, because given the context of what's supposed to happen, and it kind of happened even in the actual series, that so Obi-Wan goes off, he's going to save little Leia, but like, okay, he leaves Luke behind. And my thing is like, okay, well, what if something would have happened to Luke at that time? Like, what if what if the Sand people decided to come over and, raid, the Lars little igloo thing that they had over there? Like, okay, then what? Like, you're off gallivanting, trying to find Leia. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, it's important, but it's kind of like, all right, your job was to protect Luke. So I was kind of wondering, like, okay, well, if he's leaving to go on some adventure, like his whole purpose is null and void now, because he's not even doing what he was supposed to do in the first place. So
right, and I'll admit that. I will admit that there was look, even though I was supportive of a movie, at the time, I think I was probably more supportive of a movie than I was a series. Because I felt like a movie you could really tell a super tight, cool story that would give you. It's almost like you can imply this, and this really pertains to what we're talking about tonight too, going into a season 2. Because obviously, look, let's just say this right out the gate: you could very easily make a season 2 of this show, because it's implied that there are more adventures that Obi-Wan probably goes on, and you could do that. You can make an entire 2, maybe even 3 seasons based on various challenges that Obi-Wan faced as Luke is getting older. It's like, when do I start to tell him all this stuff? When do I start to train him? And then there's, you could also do the whole adventure of the week thing, right? You can really, instead of making it a big story arc, like, say, season 1 turned out to be, you could easily do something episodic, more like the original Star Trek or even Strange New Worlds. And I got my Star Trek reference in early. But at the time, I really was more supportive of a movie, just because I thought that you could tell a tighter story and you can imply, like, yes, many other things happen, but you didn't have to put it out there.
Yeah, see, this is where I run into the problem, is because after the heightened situations of season 1, it's kind of hard to kind of like go down from that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They're kind of like these really grandiose, spectacular things, and what are you going to do?
It's like Vader walking around choking people and snapping necks, and then now it's just like, okay, let's see Obi-Wan at the meat market again. Like,
either that or he's thwarting some local gangster that's terrorizing a business or something. See, those are the kinds of things that you could see, but see, I think the problem with what they did with season 1, it makes sense if this is a standalone thing and they're not going to do a season 2. The problem, though, is that if they do, what they've done with season 1 is they've made these like galactic, these really high galactic implications, right? I mean, Vader's there. You have all this stuff, you know, that, I mean, Leia's in danger. It's almost like you just have this super huge thing going. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of weight to this, whereas you can't really do that in a season 2. Now, granted, again, and I hate to keep flip-flopping and playing devil's advocate here, but there were a lot of people, including myself, I didn't really voice it too much, but I remember on this show we used to say things like, man, you know, I don't know, like even with the duel, it's like, how are they going to do that without negating everything in episode 4? Well, guess what? It turns out that they actually, in my opinion at least, enhanced a lot of the dialogue that happens during the duel in episode 4. It was something that I didn't think they could do. So I'm not ruling out the idea that, hey, they could come up with something that defies our expectations and we're just all like, whoa, I didn't even see this coming. But to me, kind of like what you're saying, I think it just gets less and less likely when you factor in the galactic implications of season 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that, you know, I mean, and one of the things that we'll get to in the 10, in the top 10, one thing there's one angle I could see them kind of doing, maybe that would be cool. But outside of that, not so much.
Well, and that's it. And yeah, we'll roll into basically our 10. Well, it's actually the 10 things that CBR.com had put in there as far as, you know, this is what we need to see from a season 2. And I thought that this is a really good discussion point, too, because there's a lot of these things. And again, this isn't something that was generated by us. This isn't our top 10 things that we need to see in Obi-Wan season 2. I was tempted to do that. I was tempted to just maybe use this thing as sort of a, no pun intended, but a catalyst for our own list. Like, okay, well, what are the top 10 things we want to see? But the problem is, I don't really think either one of us necessarily want to see a season 2, you know? So it's... Yeah. I'm still on the fence like you are. It's like on one hand, I love the whole characters. I love seeing Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan again. I love the furthering of the adventure. I mean, I loved all of that. But the problem is, you have to weigh that against the danger, I think, of diminishing a lot of this story arc by just simply putting out a season 2 because season 1 was successful. I think that that's the problem.
Yeah.
However, that said, as we said, CBR.com had put out this whole thing on, here are the 10 things that we basically need to see from season 2 of this thing. So, pretty much without further ado, the top 10 things. So at number 10, we basically have meeting the Jedi survivor Calcus. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this character, this is the main character that you actually see in Jedi Fallen Order, the video game. Now, I've said a bunch of times on the show, I've started to play this game. I haven't really gotten that far into it because I'm stuck at this one level that's really hard to get through. But the interesting thing about it is that, from what I understand from some of my friends who have played through this game, there's a lot of canonical stuff that happens. I mean, it really furthers the whole Star Wars canon in a very meaningful, deep way. And this Cal Kestis character, who ironically was motion captured and voiced by, forgot the actor's name, but it's the guy that played the Joker in Gotham, the one that played Jerome.
Oh, yeah.
God, I keep forgetting that guy's name. But yeah, he was really cool, and it turns out that this character becomes really pivotal, right? So the whole premise of this game is that Order 66 happens, And I mean, it's very similar to what we see in Obi Wan, actually, where you're seeing some of these Jedi, like the one that was basically hung or whatever. But Cal basically was a Padawan. It kind of has a little bit of the Kanan Jarrus vibe to it, right? So he was a Padawan at the time of at the time of Order 66, and essentially what happens is he kind of has to do what Obi-Wan has to do. He has to take on a regular job and just kind of blend in a little bit, and then some things happen to where he ends up having to make that decision. Do I use the Force and remedy the situation, or do I just let it go and keep my identity hidden? And of course, he ends up using the Force, and so the game begins. And this is very similar to what happened with Obi-Wan himself, right? I mean, we see Obi-Wan, he's just cutting, the meat and being a butcher, basically. And eventually, he keeps trying not to use the Force. Even though he does agree to go save Leia, he keeps trying not to use the Force. And then at the last minute, he realizes, like, look, if I don't use it, she's going to die. And so he ends up doing it, and, it kind of pulls him out of hiding or whatever. So, and Voyager's with us. He says Cameron Monaghan. Yeah, that's the actor's name. Yes, thank you, Voyager, for that one. See, I knew we can always count on the people that are watching the show to help us through these difficult times, right? But, that's basically one of those things that I can see that. And again, I guess if you're going to go on this whole thing, you could do that. And I know that in the Book of Boba Fett, they hinted towards some things that were in the video game. And the game itself kind of elaborated on some of the Inquisitor stories. So, I mean, there is somewhat of a precedence with this whole thing. Like, it's not just a shoehorning a popular character into the thing. I mean, there are some story-based reasons why, you might want to see Cal make his appearance. So given what I know you're not really heavily into the video games of these things, but I mean, what are your thoughts on maybe having Cal Kestis coming into this thing?
I mean, that'd be cool. I mean, once again, I mean, we've kind of saw that a little bit. Not not with Cal, but just even in the first season of Kenobi was, we saw like, okay, one of the young Jedi kind of was looking for Obi-Wan and found him, and of course, unfortunately, it didn't pan out so well for him.
Yeah,
but
not really.
But you see but you kind of understand that he was kind of like an example of why they have to kind of remain hidden for that specific reason. And so so it would be cool to kind of see how people have to maneuver around, because as we last left it, Reva is the only one who pretty much left, but you still have the rest of the Inquisitors who probably are still out, taking care of Vader's work as far as hunting down Jedi or, Force sensitive children or something like that. So I could see how their paths could cross possibly, in a situation like, let's say Cal had to land on Tatooine and, in the process, he was like, hey, Obi-Wan, and, that type of thing. I could see how that could happen.
Sure. I mean, they share some similar interests. They have and it's kind of like you said, it's funny because Reva's storyline sort of mirrors to the Inquisitor side what Ahsoka's storyline was when she just basically left the Jedi Order, and just, she had the chance to go back, all was forgiven, but she's like, yeah, you know what, I can't do this. And really, you could even say the same thing for Asajj Ventress. And honestly, I mean, Asajj meets her end it would be before episode 3, technically. Or maybe at some point during episode 3. But there's been a lot of times where I almost wish that they would just take the Dark Disciple novel and just maybe decanonize it. maybe keep some elements, but keep Asajj's death out. Because I would love to see her in live action.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I mean, that would be kind of cool. And I'm not saying that, that's not like an honorary thing for this thing, but I just see some things that could be done that I think would be really cool from a storytelling perspective. So, again, Cal Kestis, yeah, that's our number. Well, not our number 10. CBR.com. Once again, that's where this thing's coming from. We're just discussing it, much like anybody else would if you read the article. So number nine on this list is Black Chrysanthemum making an appearance. And that's the thing is, of course, we got a live action debut from him in the Book of Boba Fett. And we know from history that Darth Vader had used him to do some missions and things like that. And, of course, Boba Fett had worked with him and everything like that. But the thing is that, we never really got any of his origins or anything like that on screen. And, he actually has... if you look into the comics, he has a little bit of a relationship even with Uncle Owen. Owen Lars. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that they could technically explore. Oh, by the way, Ronaldo joined us too. What's going on, Ronaldo? Good to see you back with us. But, yeah, there's basically some things that they could do. Let me just go through this thing here. I got the article up for reference too, just in case. But yeah, there's been some instances in the comics too where Obi-Wan and Chrysanthemum actually came face to face. So if they were going to do a season 2, I think it definitely makes sense for them to feature Chrysanthemum in this, and it also ties in a little bit with the Book of Boba Fett, and it gives us more of this character too. Because let's face it, we all loved Black Chrysanthemum.
Definitely.
I mean, you got anything to add to that? Or
I think there's also just been a run-in, if I'm not mistaken, where Chrysanthemum and Obi-Wan actually got into it a little bit, and Obi-Wan left a scar.
Yes.
On Chrysanthemum.
Yes.
So if they want to kind of delve into that, because that's kind of looking at this picture right here that you have up, that's just an impressive feat because how huge, how strong Chrysanthemum is, but we also know how powerful Obi-Wan is, especially after the last episode of season 1. So that could be an interesting battle. And if I'm not mistaken, Chrysanthemum actually killed some Jedi. I think he actually did some hunting of them. So he has experience with Jedi, but I don't think he's met anybody as powerful as Obi-Wan though. And so that would be an interesting matchup just to even see that.
Yeah, and again, this picture that we got up here, I mean, this is straight from one of the comics. I don't recall exactly which one it was, but absolutely. I mean, and again, I think that, when you're looking at these things, on one hand, you do have to be a little bit careful when you're bringing in all this comic book stuff or book stuff and everything, and you're trying to maybe jam some of the continuity and the storylines and all that stuff together. But the thing that you have to remember is that when Disney took it over, one of the main things is, hey, let's make all of it canon, right? And so I think it's really important to actually include some of this stuff because you want to not fall into the trap, which is what we've had from Lucasfilm before, as a result of not everything being canon. And that is you get, okay, all this stuff going on in the comics, and you have stuff going on in the novels, and then, of course, the films, or in this case, TV series. And they all just sort of exist in their own little universe. Whereas it's much better if you tie in all this stuff, and you make this stuff tie together. I just think that makes a lot more sense to do. So, yeah, definitely Black Chrysanthemum. Okay, so now we go to number 8 in this list. And number 8 is kind of interesting because this also ties into the comment that I made with the Dark Disciple novel. Besides Asajj Ventress, we go to Asajj Ventress' surprising love interest in that book, and that is Quinlan Vos, The Return of Quinlan Vos. Now, he's another guy that was actually he was a big character in the old expanded universe. And the thing is that a lot of people, including myself, were actually hoping that he was going to make an appearance in the first season. Because in episode 3, in Revenge of the Sith, you actually had this whole reference to him. Obi-Wan actually made some reference to a report that Vos had made when he was talking to Anakin. And it was kind of a way that Lucas sort of did a nod to the expanded universe. Because what he would do is he would actually cherry pick from the expanded universe and he would canonize them as sort of a nod to fans, right? Like, okay, this is popular, fine. I'll somehow just shoehorn this into, the movies. And this is what Lucas would do, particularly in the prequel trilogy, is give a little bit of a nod to the fans by mentioning some of these characters either in passing or maybe giving him a cameo or whatever. Or sometimes they would interview him and they would ask him and he would go, okay, fine, we'll make that canon. I mean, even though in his mind only the movies and anything that he did was canon, he would sort of almost honorarily canonize certain elements of the expanded universe. But in this case, he fully canonized that by putting the reference to Quinlan Vos in there. And you know what? It would make sense. So let me reference this article really quick here just to make sure that I'm not missing. Yeah, so Vos and Kenobi shared missions during the Clone Wars. Kenobi seems relieved to see a familiar name written on the walls, because remember, Quinlan Vos' name was written on the walls. Well, we think it was him. I don't think it was actually identified as to who it was, but we think that it was his name. And nobody really knows what happened to Quinlan after Order 66. So, this would be kind of an interesting thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to bring that up. Like, they mentioned Quinlan Vos in season 1 of Kenobi, and he was actually one of the people who kind of created that whole underground system anyway, if I'm not mistaken. He was kind of like one of the
the architects of the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, basically,
for Jedi, right?
Yeah, and especially, he has very unorthodox ways of doing things a lot of times. And that's kind of what makes it interesting, because juxtaposed to Kenobi, who's usually very by the book, Quinlan Vos probably reminds him a lot of Qui-Gon. And I think that's one of the reasons why they kind of have that symbiotic, connection with each other, is because Obi-Wan's so straight-laced, but then Quinlan is kind of, you can tell by the look of him, he kind of looks revolutionary almost in a way. And
yeah, he does.
I'm sure that Obi-Wan has probably picked up some things, like some of that cunningness, because that's the thing about Quinlan. He was very cunning. He was very unorthodox with a lot of different things, and I'm sure Obi-Wan has probably picked that up from Quinlan Vos as well.
Well, you know what?
That'll be interesting.
It will be. And speaking of picking up things, this is a really good time right now to remind everybody to, if you're enjoying this so far, and you're liking what you see, and you're enjoying this little top 10 list that we're doing, courtesy of CBR.com, hit that like button. The like button really, really helps the channel. I can't stress that enough. Of course, we want you to hit that subscribe button too, and hit the notification bell, and get all the personalized recommendations of when we're going on. But especially, hit the like button, help support the channel, and of course, hey, if you want to make that little small donation, either a one-time thing, or we have a bunch of different packages if you want to support us on a monthly basis, there's a link in the description for Buy Me buymeacoffee.com.
Well, coffee,
Well, it's actually, we changed it to buy us a
coffee,
blue milk, but it's,
blue milk.
buymeacoffee.com. But the link's in the description. But hey, any level of support you guys want to give, that's cool. But at the very least, not that I'm one to sit here and actually beg people to do this, but, please hit that like button because it really does help the channel. And, of course, we want to keep bringing this stuff to you. Okay, so Quinlan Vos, I agree. I think that would be something that would be really great. We got a couple of chats here. Let me get through those. So Ronaldo says, well, they did include Fennec in a prequel project. They could do the same with Chrysanthemum, going back to Chrysanthemum. And yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of the way that they're doing these things now, is that Star Wars is open enough that they could actually find room to put a lot of these characters in without it feeling forced, without it being, okay, everybody's looking forward to this particular character coming in, let's shoehorn them in. So that's a good thing. And of course, he says, I'm 50% sure that we'll see Quinlan. That's actually a good question. What percentage would you give of seeing Quinlan Vos?
If they actually do a season 2?
Yeah. If they do a season 2.
I would go about... I'll probably side with him if it's a 50. I'll give it a 50-50 shot.
I'm going to give it 70. Because they did that little reference on the... Yeah. It's one of those things like when they kept mentioning Qui-Gon the whole time. I mean, was anybody really surprised that Qui-Gon popped at the end? I was actually surprised that Qui-Gon popped up at the very end. I thought he was going to pop up earlier.
So did I.
So, yeah. So the fact that they keep... they mentioned Quinlan a little bit. They did some of this stuff. It's like, you know what? I'm thinking... It's just... I don't know. I'm thinking 70%, but... we'll have to see. And then Ronaldo also says... Remember, guys, chat in whatever you guys are thinking about this list. This whole point of this thing is a discussion. Maybe in Obi-Wan, but it can be in something else. That's another possibility, is that it could be in something else. But the problem is, it depends on what happened to Quinlan Vos after Order 66. I think that's the X factor. Because as far as I know, we don't really know what happened to him, right? Like, I mean...
No. I mean, I can...
Because Dark Disciple killed off Asajj, but he was fine.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying, like, his interaction, it would be kind of weird. I mean, I guess you could possibly bring him into Ahsoka.
Yeah, well, that's
because
the thing.
That's dealing with a prequel character, and he's from that time frame. So she could have had dealings and interaction with him because she's, of course, with her always being around Obi-Wan and Anakin. I mean, sure, I'm sure, and of course, all the masters who were, in the temple for the most part. So, that could possibly be the case if you brought him into Ahsoka. But, I think he would be better served in Obi-Wan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go to the next one's kind of a big one, number 7. So number 7 is, of course, the takedown of Crimson Dawn. This is kind of an interesting little thing here because we know that Crimson Dawn actually resurfaces toward the end of, say, Episode 5, Episode 6, somewhere in there. But... there's a lot of really cool things that are happening around this time period because, as we know, Darth Maul, during the time that Obi-Wan, at least the series, is taking place, I mean, unless they do some really significant time jump, but they can only jump so far because, spoiler alert, he dies in Episode 4. So they can only really deal with Obi-Wan between Episodes 3 and 4, unless, of course, they do a Force Ghost thing. And at this time, Darth Maul is the one who is basically in charge of the whole Crimson Dawn thing. And I mean, they were involved in every criminal empire. I mean, if you go on to think about it, think in terms of the Hutts meets the Empire almost, you know? And of course, by the time that episode 5 hits, episode 6, around the time that this comic that's pictured takes place, Kira is in charge of Crimson Dawn. So you have to wonder, and we know that Darth Maul is killed by Obi-Wan in around the time of Rebels. So it would be interesting to see how Darth Maul, or Maul at this point, basically loses his place in the whole Crimson Dawn thing. And I think that that's mainly what this thing is referencing.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting because I think you could definitely, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where I could see Obi-Wan going up against Crimson Dawn in various situations.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like a mini empire, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite as fast as the actual Galactic Empire, but they're formidable enough. And especially with it being headed by Maul, I think that will create an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and that's why I think that ultimately, when you're dealing with something like Crimson Dawn, this is where your interesting storylines could take place. And here's another interesting thing. You could do one of two things. You could weave the solo standalone film storyline within the Obi-Wan series and merge them. Because remember, the Obi-Wan series is taking place, I think it's like a little bit before Solo. It could be a little after, but I think it's a little bit before. But it's around the same time. The other thing that you can do is you could seed out some things in season 2 of Obi-Wan and then continue them in essence, kind of a Crimson Dawn-centric series, right? Which would, basically, it would pretty much be the Solo sequels that we never got. Because remember, Solo was supposed to be a trilogy. It just, when the first film didn't perform the way that people thought it should, then they pulled the plug on it. But there's been, besides the whole make Solo 2 happen or whatever hashtag we got before, they could very easily take what they were going to take for Solos 2 and 3, just turn them into a Disney Plus series that focuses on Crimson Dawn, and maybe you bring Lando, maybe you bring Solo into it even. But you can plant the seed in Obi-Wan.
That's a good, very valid point. Like I said, Crimson Dawn ended up being a very formidable group and a very powerful one at that. And so, yeah, I think I could see Obi-Wan kind of throwing a monkey wrench in a lot of their operations and certain things that they want to do. And, like that can create interesting. That's what I said. Like, this is the particular one I could say, like, all right, if they did a season 2, Crimson Dawn would be the best foe for him to kind of interfere with versus going back into dealing with Vader and the Empire again.
Sure, you could even go a step further. You could bring Black Sun in, or the Pikes, because we already saw them in the Book of Boba Fett, right?
But see, that didn't come until that time period. So I think if you brought the Pikes into it, I mean, they couldn't come to. In other words, you could use the Pikes, but they couldn't come to Tatooine yet, because I think that's the first time that they started dealing with that planet.
Yeah, well, but I mean, we saw the Pikes in season 7 of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we knew they were around, but what I'm saying is, because Obi-Wan is stationed on Tatooine, you don't want to have the Pikes come to Tatooine when allegedly their first dealings with Tatooine wasn't until Book of Boba Fett, which takes place after.
I think the word allegedly is probably the best. you know how the whole Lucasfilm thing goes, man. It's like anything that they think might be a good idea, they'll find a way to do that. All right, so the next one is another big one. Now this one's a little bit controversial. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this. It's basically the return of Mace Windu. And I've actually thought about this. I thought about this with even season 1 of Obi-Wan, where I've always been one of those people in the camp of, listen, Mace only got his hands chopped off And sure, he fell out a window, but, you know, he could use the Force to slow him down. I mean, let's just say there's a lot of ways they could easily make him survive. And then, you know, lest I bring it up again, Maul got cut in half and fell down a shaft. To me, anybody can survive at that point, right? But the thing about Mace, though...
I'm going to step away for just a moment, but you can continue. I'll be right back.
All right. So, I think the whole idea with Mace is that he's a really popular character. He probably should have actually had more time in the spotlight than he has in the past. And I think that I've always just gotten the idea that his story isn't finished. You know, that you would have to figure out, though, where to put him. The problem is if you put him around the time of Ahsoka or the Book of Boba Fett or some of these other series that take place after Return of the Jedi, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. You know, you're going to have to figure out, okay, well, where was he during this whole time? What was he doing? I mean, yes, even as late as a sequel trilogy, which takes place even further, there was a lot of people that were trying to speculate, oh, Snoke is actually Mace Windu. And then, I mean, there were some things that were kind of cool about that idea, but I don't know. I just think that was not the way to go, right? Let's see, but we got Ronaldo. Ronaldo feels very strongly about this. He says, no. I love Mace, but his story ended with his death. A prequel, maybe, but there's no need to bring him back. Well, that's kind of interesting that you feel that strongly about it, Ronaldo. And then, of course, Voyager's like, Daryl, where'd you go? I don't know. Daryl had to step out for a second. I mean, it happens, you know. Live show. Things come up sometimes. Again, we're not full-time YouTubers, so... Unlike some of these guys, we don't have a studio where we go, where we can just isolate, and this is kind of like our gig or whatever. It's something we do for the love of discussing Star Wars and everything else. But he'll be back. He just stepped out for a minute. But Ronaldo, picking up on your comment with this whole Mace Windu thing, I just think that there's... And I'm not saying... They should. I mean, I want to point this out, that this is a list that we're discussing based on what... who wrote this thing anyway? Let's see. This article from CBR.com was written by Chantel Von Ford. So this is Chantel's opinion, I guess. But look, I mean, it's like I said... You could say that, you know, sure, Mace definitively died or whatever, but you could say the same thing about Darth Maul, too. You know, Darth Maul had a pretty definitive death. And his story could have easily ended at the end of Episode 1. And I remember when they were first bringing him back, and remember, it was George Lucas himself that brought him back. I think that the thing that makes it intriguing to me is that now that I've seen everything that they've done with Darth Maul, it's like, man, I mean, I never imagined in a million years that I would really love where they've gone with it, because when they first brought Darth Maul back, I was super skeptical. I mean, I was almost upset enough not to even watch, because I thought it was a cheap move. I really did. Ronaldo says, Daryl went to the dark side. He's in the Dark Lord of the Sith now, or he is a Dark Lord of the Sith. Which brings me to another point. There have some that have speculated that it would be interesting to make Mace go dark for whatever reason, because remember, he is a practitioner of the dark. Like, he uses half dark, half light side. But I don't think that that was the case, and I really don't think that that would be a good direction to go. I think if you're going to bring Mace Windu back, the best thing to do would be to just maybe, and this is what's difficult, because, Ronaldo, I got to tell you that I kind of feel what you're saying, Because if you can't come up with a really good storyline and a good in-universe reason to have him survive, then it might be best to just leave him as dead because it's somewhat of a complete storyline. Ronaldo goes on to say it's like Boromir. Amazing character, but his story finished with his death. And look, this is another good discussion point for us. Because a lot of times I think what happens is people fall in love with a character, and for whatever character reason, that character dies. And so the temptation is, hey, the character's really popular or whatever, let's bring the character back. And sometimes, you just have to kill off really good characters. Just because somebody's popular doesn't mean you should just wrench them back from the dead just to squeeze a few more dollars out of their involvement in your franchise. So I get it, Ronaldo, and I'm not necessarily, let's put it this way, and Daryl, now that you're back, you can weigh in on this a little too before we move on to the next one. My thoughts about Mace Windu coming back, I loved the character. Mace is one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. So I will say this. Mm-hmm. If you can find a compelling way, story-wise, to have him return, much like what they did with Maul in his story arc, I am 1,000% on board with that. However, if you're going to just do it to just, hey, he's popular, you know what? I think we can squeeze him into the Obi Wan series. Then, no. Don't ruin a good story arc and a good character.
Yeah, you actually just took the thoughts right out of my head on that one.
I'll put him back.
Oh, thank you. It's like a little Kylo Ren thing going on.
I know.
No, but no, I completely agree. I mean, I love Mace Windu as well. I think he was one of the more interesting characters, and I hate that he actually died. However, I think it was used to show how powerful Palpatine was, because if you think about it, Palpatine pretty much wiped out the entire Jedi Council. Let's think about that. He practically brought majority of the Jedi Council and maybe a couple other Jedi Masters with him, and Palpatine was just going through him like a hot knife through butter. And then you get to Mace.
It's like, did you guys stop training or something? I mean, it was just...
And, Mace gets to him, and, now it's a competition. Now it's a real battle. And see, I've always wished I could have seen the actual, battle between Mace and Palpatine without the interference of Anakin, because...
I know.
Little
brat ruins everything.
I know. The Wesley Crusher of the Star Wars universe.
Yes, he
That's
is.
My Star Trek reference.
There you go.
So,
I want to see some likes from Star Trek fans out there. Watch all of a sudden it just starts ticking up.
But the thing is that because Mace uses the dark side, I would have loved it, because we've never really seen that though. Mm-hmm. We've never seen a light side guy use the dark side in a positive manner, or guess another dark side user. That was an interesting dynamic to me, and that was really kind of miffed at the fact that we didn't get more of that. But once Mace went out the window, it kind of did show that okay,
oh man, it almost I don't mean to interrupt, but it almost sounded like you said once Mace went out the window. Okay, before we get
there's actually a meme about that.
I know, I saw that. I did see that. It kind of reminded me of that, actually.
But that's one of the things about, like you said, killing off certain characters, is because you need to feel that weight. Without pivotal loss, sometimes you don't feel that. It's no different than Game of Thrones, right? There's some cool characters that we would have loved to have seen go on in Game of Thrones, but they had to die because it added more weight to the circumstances. And so bringing Mace back, although it will be cool and I would love to see him, quite honestly, I don't see where he would fit. in any of this, like post. I mean, because if he's around, like, okay, you know, let's just face it, this guy got his hands lopped off by Vader. I will basically, like, why didn't Mace go after, Vader at that point? You know what I mean? Like, or at least help train Luke, or what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
there's
well,
so many.
that's been my problem. Well, that's my
You're gonna
problem with
cause a
all the
lot of
series.
issues.
Well,
Yeah.
that's my biggest issue with this whole thing. Because, and this is why I say that, again, I know it's not that popular, but at some point, either they're going to have to do it softly or they're going to have to do hard remakes of episodes 4, 5, and 6. Because, look, this franchise is really old, and you're starting to be trapped by the constrictions and the constraints of the original trilogy. And part of that is exactly what you're saying. It's kind of like, okay, on one hand, you want to have all these Jedi, you want to have some survive Order 66, and on it goes. And you could do that with the way that the whole thing is right now. Because you could just say, look, these guys just started living normal lives, and we're like, okay, whatever, we were beaten. Nothing we can do about it. And that does not ruin the continuity of Obi-Wan and Yoda knowing about the Chosen One's kids, saying, hey, if we train these kids up to rise up against Vader and the Emperor, they could defeat him. Okay, the average Jedi isn't going to know that. Mace didn't even know that. Right. So it would be interesting in some ways to see where some of these Jedis, like we mentioned earlier, Calcus, right? To see where some of these guys and have them make an appearance or whatever. You have Ahsoka, but you got to wonder where she was. You kind of had that explained, but there's a danger if you start bringing too many people into this. Because like you said, it's going to start to really muck up the story, and you don't want to do that.
Exactly.
All right, so the next one. Where are we at? I think we're at number 5. Yeah, we're at number 5 now. Number 5 is reuniting with Commander Cody. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that Cody was the homeless clone in the whole Obi Wan thing, right? And and basically, we know that around the time even of the Bad Batch, they were starting to phase out a lot of the clones, and they were going with stormtroopers. And it would be really interesting to see how Cody would see this, how he would deal with this, given his relationship with Obi-Wan, given a lot of the other things. It would just be really interesting to see this. And I think that because of the relationship that you had with a lot of the clones personally, with their generals, with their Jedi generals, I think it would be intriguing to explore, particularly with Cody, where everything is at. And seeing that homeless clone was a really nice continuation of what we started to see in the Bad Batch, which is these clones who were once the mighty army of the Republic are essentially garbage. They're just being discarded in favor of stormtroopers. And to me, that's an interesting storyline too.
Yeah, honestly, to me, this is one of the more compelling ones to me, honestly. I really can see a lot of emotional content with this particular pairing. We go back to Revenge of the Sith, Cody got the order and he actually fired upon Obi-Wan.
Yep.
They, and caused him to fall off that mountain that he was right on, that weird, dragon thing. And, then, of course, now that he's been kind of, been deactivated in so many ways, in so many words, from the Empire, it would just, I would love to hear things once again from their perspective. That was so, like you said, that was so awesome about the Bad Batch, is because when they started to realize, they was like, wait a minute, like, these
like
troopers are different. Like, these are different. These aren't us. This isn't, These aren't the ones we're you know, accustomed to. These are a completely different type of soldiers. What's going on? And so from Cody's perspective, now you can hear from, because the Bad Batch, they were already renegades anyway, but Cody was a part of that original unit, that original team. And so for him to get swept out, no different than what's the other one in the blue? Rex.
Yeah,
so
Rex.
So you had Cody and Rex were kind of like the two main guys. And so to see them kind of get like ushered out, and it's like, okay, well, their whole life, because they even said in the Clone Wars, like, this is all we know. This is what we were literally born for. We serve no other purpose but to be soldiers. So now that they don't need us anymore, like, how do I adapt to life? What do I do with myself? You start to, does Cody start to see, man, I was fighting for the wrong side, but I had no choice because of this chip. There's a lot of different things, and I could see him having a heart-to-heart with Obi-Wan that would be very emotionally driven. And I think that would actually really be cool.
Oh, yeah. Ronaldo says, this one I like. He's a cool character, and it makes sense. We haven't seen him after episode 3. And I can understand the spirit of your comments, Ronaldo. Just, they have a theme tonight. And that's basically that you don't want to see any character come back or utilized that's been shoehorned into the series, right? That it's kind of like, oh, they're popular, let's bring them back. Just for the sake of bringing them back. But something that fits organically in the story, which Cody does, admittedly. Because here's the thing, with Mace Windu, you would have to find a compelling way to bring him back into the story. Like, you'd have to put some thought into this. And, if they're on their game that day, they probably could figure out a way to do that. That would feel organic. The thing is, and I hate to overuse the word organic because everybody is using that term a lot, but I mean, in this case, it fits, right? In the case of Cody, that's organic right out of the gate. Like, you don't have to have some brilliant storyteller figure out a way to bring that in. And that's where
naturally fits in.
Exactly. And that's where I think Ronaldo's coming from. And that's why I think that that's actually a really good choice as well. This one is kind of a weird one. I actually had to sort of, I don't know, I had to look at this one. But this one is exploring the path's past and future. So let me just read this from the actual article thing, because I remembered this, but I didn't remember every detail from it. So it was like, in part 3, and, we're talking about of the Obi-Wan series. Obi-Wan is introduced to the path. The path was that little underground railroad thing, I think, that we were talking about earlier. While fans theorize that Jedi survivor Calcus created the path, which would actually be a really good way to bring him into the series, as a result of a Jedi holocron he received, all they really know is that it's trying to aid Force-sensitive refugees who are trying to escape the Empire. And a lot of people were wondering, where were a lot of these Force-sensitive people or Jedi or Padawans or whatever during A New Hope or the rest of the original trilogy. And one way that you could definitely explain this is the path, and so we were introduced to it in the Obi-Wan series, but it would be cool to maybe explore that further should they do an episode 2, a season 2, because again, like you said, they can't really do too much as far as like these great galactic implications, right? They got to keep it a little bit more streamlined, a little bit closer to the vest. So they could do that. They could do that by maybe taking the focus off of Obi-Wan a little bit and putting it on this, and maybe how Obi-Wan helps.
Yeah, I mean, because if you recall, it was... I'm trying to think. I think it was the last episode. I think it was the last episode of Kenobi, where the Grand Inquisitor And he was sitting next to Vader, and they were trying to make the decision, like, okay, do we go after this ship, or do we go after Kenobi? And the Grand Inquisitor was basically trying to tell Vader, like, look, we have an opportunity now to kind of like snuff out like this whole budding rebellion, basically. But he also, because they knew about the path, because even Reva brought it up as well, because that's what she was trying to figure out, like, okay, well, where are the rest of the Jedi? And so I think that that does lend to or there is precedence to kind of go that route, no pun intended. So
yeah, I mean,
that will be a cool thing, because of course you have to wonder, how that all the remaining Jedi, because of course, in Revenge of the Sith, they sent that beacon out to like not come back to Coruscant, so to go into hiding basically. And what, how did you of course you have people who are stragglers and who might not even got the full story or something like that, so everybody's kind of filtering out and like, okay, we got to get people to safety. Where do they go? Do they go to the unknown regions? Do they go, how do you get away from the Empire that's seemingly everywhere?
Well, I will say this. Eventually, if they keep telling these stories around, say, between episodes 3 and 4, and even the way that they're exploring all this other stuff, it's like, look, you're going to have to eventually tell us where all these Jedi went. Because otherwise, we make this joke, well, every other show. We say, listen, if you're Luke Skywalker, you defeat the Emperor and Vader and everything's cool, and all of a sudden all these people come out of the woodwork, like these semi-powerful Force users. He'd be like, could have used the help, guys. That's all I'm saying. Maybe, I mean, it would have been nice if maybe I could have gotten a couple of you guys at least. Sure, the less talented ones would be more like cannon fodder, right? You just charge and you're dispatched, but it buys time for the rest of us. It's like, look, this could have been a little bit easier on me. I might not have had to endure Force lightning I'm just saying, if I had like Ahsoka and a few of you guys, maybe things would have turned out differently. Okay, so we got Voyager. Got a couple chats here. Voyager says, a second season with Obi Wan, the Path, Quinlan, Cody, and Calcus would be interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, when you really start to factor in the totality of this list, because we're on like number 4, so we got 3 more we got to cover. But even these first 6 or whatever, it's like, you could see how a second and even third season can shape up without necessarily destroying the integrity of episode 4 or anything that came, before or after, basically.
And just looking at Voyager's list, he said the Path, Cody, and Quinlan. I could see something to the point of, and Cal, yeah. So I could see something to the point where Cody runs into Obi-Wan and they kind of, patch things up or whatever, to, mend their friendship, so to speak. And then there's a situation where it's like, okay, we got to get these Jedi or these remaining Jedi to safety. Cody wants to serve again. He's like, well, I don't have a purpose anymore. I'm no longer in the Empire. So I'm used to, working with you. Okay, so then, that's when they kind of meet up with Quinlan and they kind of start finding a way to usher more Jedi to the Path. And then that's eventually, Cal may make an appearance. It's like, Obi-Wan, so good to meet you, or something like that. And, General Kenobi, or however he chooses to address him, and I could see that being like a cool episode, or even like a little story arc of, okay, we got to get these remaining Jedi, to safety. So,
I mean, honestly,
that might not be a bad one.
Yeah, you could, even just this one point alone, right? Even ignoring the other ones, you start talking about the Path, you could almost just base another season just purely off of this. And to that
trying to
point,
find it, and
sure, or just the continuing adventures or whatever. And Ronaldo, to that point, says, "I would actually like to see a spinoff of this. Imagine a story about Jedi trying to save other Jedi."
Machines making machines.
I mean, it's cool because once again, see, if only we were all on the story group,
The group.
maybe we could actually fix a lot of these problems that Star Wars has. So, there is hope. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, you could do something like that. That's what I was talking about actually a second ago. Ronaldo, you always, every single time, you're always making a point in the chat as I'm saying something or whatever. It's, I guess, it's a Jedi mind thing. Yes, the Force is definitely strong with them. And that's true. You could actually make a very compelling season or a spin-off series just basically based on that. And then you wouldn't have to do like a kid type of thing, right? That could be more of an adult version. And then Voyager says the path can tie in with Cody and as a way of a vocabulary word.
Yes, I love it. To ameliorate.
Yes, his guilt for Order 66. Very good. I'm always
well done.
so always happy about that. That was one of the things that when you and I were working together at the school, we were always trying to teach our students to broaden their vocabulary and actually try to use words that maybe aren't so common. Yeah, I actually pulled that out at work not too long ago where I don't know, I used some word that some of the other guys hadn't heard. And they're just like, whoa, I use this in a sentence, and it's that's always cool. But yeah, definitely, you could tie in a lot of this stuff. And honestly, it wouldn't be that difficult. That's the thing. It's Star Wars as a franchise. Whether you're talking about just in this single series alone or if you tie in everything, including the films, they have actually seeded out all these various concepts, story arcs, things that you can build on. And that's why I say they try too hard, I think. And we brought this up. It was either the last show or it was a show before where we said they're too busy trying to make a successful Star Wars film or show instead of a good one. And one that's actually like Star Wars. All right. So what are we on? I think we're on number 3. And that is Reestablish the Force connection. Particularly his Force connection.
Yeah.
A lot of people were rightfully upset when Obi-Wan spent a good deal of the season pretty much cut off from the Force. It actually reminded me of the same, let's just say, disappointment and outright anger when Luke was cut off from the Force. Everybody thought that by the end of episode 8, like, it's okay to go through maybe a third of the movie like that, but they wanted to see something different. Now, as Ronaldo has often pointed out, because he loves The Last Jedi, and we actually really enjoy it too. I mean, sure, we see some problems with it, but overall, the darker themes, Luke's disillusionment, and willingly cutting himself off from the Force, that makes sense. Story-wise, this makes sense because obviously if he didn't cut himself off from the Force, he could have been discovered by the Inquisitors or especially by Vader. And I think that that's a big thing that people overlook is that Vader can sense the Force from, pretty far away. Let's just put it that way. And so this is a strong thing, and what they could do is because this thing ended with Qui-Gon going, hey, I got some stuff that I can show you. Maybe you can explore a second season where he starts to search for some answers and unravel some mysteries.
And see, this is my problem with the way they kind of did things with Kenobi. So, okay, I get the point that, at one point, okay, he was trying to hide and he was still trying to not use the Force.
Mm-hmm.
But once Vader and everybody kind of became aware of him, right?
Yeah.
that he's alive and he's and well and he's in fact on this ship or on this base or whatever the heck they are. Like, okay, in my mind, I would have had him meet up with Qui-Gon earlier and kind of had these conversations, like the whole Force Ghost thing and whatever the case may be, because after he has this big climactic duel with Vader, right? Vader's ticked. He's upset, at the end of this. And he wants to find Kenobi again because now he really wants to kill him. So it would seem that Obi Wan would actually disconnect again from the Force until Luke is ready, because you would know Vader, because you didn't kill him.
Well,
So
there's so much.
You see what I'm saying?
Here.
Like,
yeah, I mean, look,
that he would go back into hiding again, because
I know
between then.
I know.
Because between the time he, actually goes up to Luke and hello there, okay, like he does all of that, like Vader is still actively looking for him. So if if Obi-Wan is out here still using the Force, learning how to become a Force ghost, searching for answers, blah, 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 like Vader's going to feel that. And he knows Obi-Wan. He knows what Obi-Wan feels like. I mean, we saw what happened just when he was walking through that little small town and he could sense Obi-Wan. So it's like, all right, at this point now, at the end of Kenobi, he should probably like, okay, I probably need to go back into hiding so I can still protect Luke without people knowing where I am, because I know, because I didn't kill Vader, he's probably actively looking for me.
Well, this is the problem that I have with this whole story arc in season 1, that I guess I could sort of repair this in season 2, but probably not really. First of all, him cutting himself off from the Force, I guess they did establish that he was fairly decent in hand-to-hand combat and all this stuff, but it's like, dude, how are you going to protect Luke from all these Grand Inquisitors, from all this other stuff that's happening, if you cut yourself off from the Force? It's like, I get it on one hand. Yeah, he doesn't want to be detected by anybody, and he doesn't want to sound out any alarms, because if he cuts himself off from the Force and he's just another guy, and Luke is just some other kid who's, a farmer's kid, they could probably skate through, but that's an awful risk to take. It almost seems like what you would want to do more than cut yourself off is maybe suppress it, which, Yoda managed to do and a couple others. The second problem that I have is this whole Qui-Gon thing. It's like, it was only after he reestablished his connection, all that stuff, because Qui-Gon basically said, look, I've been here the whole time. You just haven't seen me. And it's like, well, there's a lot of problems with that, though. Because, again, one of the issues that I have with Star Wars as a whole, particularly the original trilogy, but the more they keep filling in stuff, it actually adds to that for me. And that is, it's like you are taking...
light on it, yeah.
Yes, you're taking a huge gamble. Like, to you, Luke and his training and his success, whether it's Luke or Leia, it doesn't matter. Point is, one of these kids has to be trained and has to be able to go up against Vader and the Emperor. Right? The whole galaxy is at stake here. And it just seems like, man, they're taking all these cavalier risks and they're just handling this so sloppily that it's a miracle it even worked. It's
yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, at some point, like I said, right after this whole duel, Vader gets his mask put back together and he's back in his shiny new suit. Went to stop and see the tailor, got his cape hemmed. All right, he's back in action. Now it's like, okay, like I said, his priority is, even Palpatine was just like, are you sure your feelings are clear? Obi-Wan means nothing to me, or whatever, and I'm clear and all this stuff, but he still wants to take out Obi-Wan. So it's just like, okay, if Obi-Wan is still using the Force, Vader's gotta feel that. And it's like, okay, this time, no holds barred. Send a whole detachment down there to deal with him, or, you know, and there you go.
It's true.
So
He's like
that's what,
one
like you
guy.
said, yeah,
And I mean, I
you
get
know,
it from a tactical. So at first, I was thinking in terms of, well, I don't know. I think that Vader's trying to put one over on Palpatine in that case. You know, it's like, no, seriously, I don't have any feelings towards my old master at all. When really he's like plotting his revenge or whatever. But you could see though, from a tactical perspective, why Vader would want to take out Obi-Wan.
or maybe this dawned on me. Maybe Vader is kind of like, you know what, I'm through with Obi-Wan because, you know, I went. I mean, it kind of goes back to the whole thing how you said it strengthened their battle in A New Hope because Obi-Wan royally kicked the crap out of Vader,
Yeah.
and you know, Vader
Man.
might not want no parts of that. Like, okay, you know, I mean, he was mad at the time, of course. Like, you know, he wanted to finish the fight, but you know, probably in the light of day, once he had a chance, like I said, to get his cape hemmed, you know, get a new M1 chip put in his, you know, little chest plate.
I know. I always think
you
of
know,
that. You know that ending scene at the Wizard of Oz where they're all going through their little manicures and makeovers and all that before seeing the wizard. So what I always imagine it looks like in Vader's thing, you know, and they start singing the little Wizard of Oz songs and stuff. I know it's quirky, but you guys know me. I mean, this is who I am.
Right, gotta own it.
Yeah,
but yeah, but I could just see like, okay, once Vader kind of gets, you know, reassembled and back in working condition, he's probably thinking like, you know, I thought I could take out my old master because he's always thought he could do that. And that, I think that was the purpose of the flashbacks too, was because, you know, even then as a young one, as a, you know, as a Padawan still, Anakin's like, oh yeah, you know, I've got you, you know, and Obi-Wan always keeps showing him up every single time. And even this time, you know, Vader's thought, okay, you know, I thought I defeated you because he told him, he's like, you know, this is why you'll lose. And then he comes back and kicks the crap out of me again. So he's probably like, you know what? I'm gonna just leave Obi-Wan there. I'm not gonna bother him. I'm gonna just continue
right.
my world domination.
It's like, you know what?
And
If
just
you just stay out of my way, I'll stay out of your way. We're good, you know. Yeah, that could be.
That's why it makes sense when he said you should not have come back.
Right. And that's what I meant is that when you really stop and think about that dialogue now in episode 4, it makes even more sense now.
Yeah, when I left you, I was only but a learner.
Yep.
You know,
I mean, they're just
I
kudos to those guys. Yes.
You know.
Massive props to them.
Yeah.
Let me get some of these chats in. There's a couple here before we move on to the next one. I think Qui-Gon, Ronaldo says, I think Qui-Gon would be one of the main characters if there's a second season. I would definitely agree with that. I would think that if he's not a main character as far as being in most of the scenes or whatever, I definitely think that we're talking about a 2-episode story arc or something where he's heavily featured, or maybe he's just peppered in through, you know, the entire series. Kind of like how Vader was. I could see that. Let's see. Ronaldo also says, Force ghosts never appear when you need them. Isn't that the truth? You know, it almost makes you wonder. There was actually a theory a while ago that conjuring yourself as a Force ghost wasn't like you could just turn it on and off like a light or something. Like, it required, and maybe this is something they explore in 2, right? Because Qui-Gon has to teach Obi-Wan the whole, hey, here's how you turn yourself into a Force ghost thing. So, I don't know. We'll have to see. All right. So, moving on, the next thing that has to be dealt with is Ahsoka has to deal with Anakin's fall. You know, it needs to explore how that came to be. And I could see that. Because at first when I read this, I was like, well, it's kind of an odd thing to want to put in to Obi-Wan Season 2. But then it made sense to me. Because we really don't know how Ahsoka arrived to be involved with the rebellion. She became Fulcrum. She just kind of just appears in Rebels out of nowhere, and she's obviously very highly placed, right? And everything else. And then of course she duels Anakin, which as we pointed out in our last show, we may see that in a live action setting. But let me just quote some of this article here. So Ahsoka Tano is a wiser and calmer Force user in recent stories than she was as a Padawan. However, she's also burdened with the knowledge that her Jedi Master was Anakin Skywalker, and Kenobi knows that man is long gone. It's possible that a second season of Kenobi could have the pair deal with their grief of losing their friend together. And I think that that's actually kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
It gives you a little bit of context of what sort of happened between the Clone Wars and then when we pick it up again with Ahsoka in Rebels, and then when you fast forward then to The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and then soon her own series. So it actually gives you a little bit of a scope of what happened to her between all this stuff. A good sampling.
Yeah, at first, I kind of shared your sentiments, and it wasn't until now, really, I was like, okay, well, yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. Like, okay, I could see
you're begrudgingly agreeing with this whole thing. Like, all right, fine.
No, I could see her popping up, or why she would pop up, but once again, though, it's still one of those situations where she's around. Why aren't you helping? I mean, I get it. It's a destiny thing. I know that's the whole premise of it all. Like, Luke has to fulfill his destiny. That's his destiny, to redeem his father. And, even Obi Wan himself said, if you face him, I can't go with you. This is one of those things you got to do on your own. And I get that, but it just stands to reason, like, and maybe they could talk about that. Maybe that could be that'd be a cool conversation to have. Obi-Wan talking to Ahsoka, like, maybe Ahsoka's like, well, I'll help when the boy gets old enough. I'll, do this. And he was like, well, no, this is something that, I need to do.
Well, wait a minute, though. You're onto something. I think that it would almost be cool if you're going to do this, right? That maybe you do something to where you see that Obi-Wan's sacrifice was really more of a premeditated thing, right? That it wasn't just somewhat of a situational or circumstantial thing. And that he's saying, okay, I'm going to get him to this point, and then eventually Yoda will get him to this point, and then beyond that. And it would make sense because, Obi-Wan knows he's not going to be around forever, and his main job is to get Luke started on the path. And Yoda knew his job was to provide him with the main crux of the training and to get him ultimately prepped to face Vader and the Emperor. And then Ahsoka's job from then can be, okay, now that they're defeated and you want to restart the Jedi Order, now I'm going to kick in and help with that.
Yeah, that's a good plausible theory. I
mean, it's 100% not going to happen, but I mean, it's one of those things that I think should happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. It's just one of those things where you're banking on a lot, though. Once again, because, like, what if one of them died? Like,
well, they're banking on a lot anyway, though. I mean, if you really think of the way.
Like, well, that's what my whole point is. Like, what if Yoda got a bad cold? What if he caught COVID or something? That took him out of here.
Well, it's like, what if even looking at Obi-Wan season 1, right? What if those bandits had overtaken him? He was clearly out of shape. He barely won those fights.
Yeah.
All right. So then Voyager says, the live-action Star Wars coming out. Oh, he's hitting us with a question. Which are you looking most forward to? Mando Season 3, Andor, Ahsoka, the Acolyte, Skeleton Crew, or the possible Book of Boba Fett? Because, as we know, a poster leaked for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's I don't know, man. That's a lot of choices you're giving us on that one. But, man,
I can't say.
probably,
Well, go ahead.
well, okay, so let me preface it like this. If I were to come up with a graph of all those, right, they would probably all be kind of like within each other, but then there
Mm-hmm.
would be one that might be more the clear winner. And, I mean, who knows, man? This could change tomorrow, but I think right now I'd have to say the Acolyte. And the reason for that is because, and this is something you always brought up, Daryl, is the fact that we never really explored the Sith and their training and their whole system of doing things and the challenges they face, and are they tempted by the light side and all these other things. So as much as obviously the leaked season 3 Mandalorian trailer, which by the way, I think I did find probably the best copy that I could. I'm thinking this is kind of a little bit of a sneak preview. I'm tempted to maybe do that for Monday's show. It's not set in stone yet, but I'm thinking if I could find a way, to get that in, that I think I found somewhat, because none of them are clean. They're all kind of like that whole bootleg, somebody's filming in a movie theater kind of thing, right? But it's relatively clean. But when you factor in that trailer, when you factor in the storylines that they could use in the Book of Boba Fett Season 2, Skeleton Crew, I think is actually a cool concept, but to be honest, I don't know enough about it yet to be excited about it. I'm interested in it. I'm curious about it. Excitement might be a little bit strong of a word, though. Ahsoka, I am very excited for Ahsoka. I did see some of the images that leaked from that trailer where she was kind of on the ghost and it was empty, and there's some stuff like that. So there's some cool stuff there. What else is brought up here? Seasons. Oh, Andor. And of course I cover Mando.
Oh.
That's what I was. Yeah, so I was talking about Mandalorian season 3 in the trailer, and we might do it on Monday. And
oh yeah.
So I mean, Andor, I'm really excited about too. But again, while I'm excited about it, Andor is probably the one that's like kind of a little bit below some of the other ones, maybe above Skeleton Crew, because I don't know that much about it. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go with the Acolyte. And of course, in typical fashion, or at least mostly typical fashion, Ronaldo says it's the Acolyte for me. While we're at it, what are you guys thinking? Voyager, anybody else that's watching this? We've had some viewers tonight, so you haven't chatted in. You still have some time. Chat in the answer to this one. Put it in the comments section while you're watching this. It's a good opportunity to, if you're watching the rebroadcast of this, put it in the comments section. Which one of those series that Voyager brought up are you looking most forward to? So I think I already know the answer, but what is it for you?
It's hard, man. It's really, because I'm really at a tie between Acolyte and Ahsoka.
Wow.
I'm really like,
I was wrong.
I mean, granted,
I was wrong.
I was wrong. Yeah, because like you said, for the reasons I've always said, why Acolyte intrigues me so much is because we've never seen the Sith side of things. But I think Ahsoka has a lot of pivotal things that could answer a lot of different questions. I mean, like there's a lot that can happen in Ahsoka, and she's such a character because she's got one foot in almost every trilogy. Well, not trilogy, but era, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So, she was in the prequel era. That's where we come to meet her. But then, she, kind of came post prequel, as you like to say, in that space where Rebels, where she made her resurgence. And then she disappears again on the hunt for Ezra. So maybe that's where she was doing the original trilogy. Like, well, look, I had bigger fish to fry. I was trying to find Ezra. And then, now she's popped up again, post original trilogy era, where now she's in The Mandalorian. So the fact that her perspective would be very interesting, just simply because she knew Anakin during the time period of when he was a Jedi, and then she faced off with him as Vader in Rebels. Then she's around, but she's not involved in the events of the original trilogy because she's probably looking for Ezra during that time period. But I'm sure she's hearing things that are going on in the galaxy about Luke and his victories, like blowing up the Death Star and then eventually toppling Palpatine and Vader. So it will be interesting to hear like that side of things from her. And then where she is now, now we have this whole resurgence of her yet again, of her popping up in Mandalorian season 2. So it's really like, I think she has a really vast, compelling.
Well, and don't forget
arc.
Thrawn too, right?
Yeah, there's that as well.
That's a big reason. The live action debut of Thrawn.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
That's what I'm saying. Like her arc is vast, and she probably has a lot to say and a lot to talk about and show us. But the Acolyte, once again, is that one piece that's so super unknown that we haven't seen really in live action.
Well, and you could do this too, but I mean, if I had to rank my excitement based on some of these, I would definitely say the Acolyte is number 1. That's the one I'm the most excited about. Ahsoka is probably number 2. Mandalorian season 3 is number 3. Then I'm gonna probably say Andor, Book of Boba Fett, and then Skeleton Crew.
I go with that order.
Yeah,
I will go with that order.
And you guys, chat in your order too if you want to. But as far as the most excited, our guys have said, Voyager says, I think Ahsoka, but I need to watch Rebels before so I understand who everyone is. That's actually definitely a good idea. I was gonna say, that's
you're definitely very wise of you.
Yes, given everything that I've heard of it, you're definitely going to want to watch Rebels. And honestly, I end up finding a way to say this in every show too. Well, first, let me get this out of the way. I got a new batch of comics in. I haven't read them yet, but can't say enough good things about the comics. The comics contain a lot of canon. They contain a lot of great stories. If you're a Star Wars fan, you definitely want to read the comics. I am punching away at Shadow of the Sith. Fantastic book. Awesome. And, of course, and this is the point I was going to make, Clone Wars and Rebels. If you guys haven't, at the very least, if you do nothing else, watch the Clone Wars, all 7 seasons, and Rebels, which I think is 4 seasons, because so much information. And while you probably won't be totally lost because Disney is doing a very good job at making it for the casual fan, so all the information that you need about these characters is revealed within the show, you're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't watch the Clone Wars and Rebels, because it's informing all these series, and it's going to enrich them immensely for you. Let's see what we got here. Oh, and then, of course, Ronaldo says, rumor says Andor is fantastic. And that's the thing. I've been hearing some, and I don't mean to diminish just because Andor was like, I don't know, number 4 or something. I don't mean to diminish, because again, when you're choosing between all these shows, the excitement level is really high for all of them, to be honest. So, it's not like, it's among the top of the top for me. And Voyager says, Rogue One was a little too grounded and gritty for me, although it's a fantastic film. So I know Andor will be the same. I'm hoping there's romance and Force users in Andor. Force users, I don't really see that happening.
Yeah. I don't
Romance,
see that happen. Romance, possibly.
yeah, romance I could possibly see happening. I mean, I think unfortunately though, if the whole gritty, down and dirty realism isn't for you, Andor's probably going to be at the bottom of your list. I would still suggest you check it out because we really don't know what the tone's ultimately going to look like. I mean, it might still be kind of a down and dirty thing without necessarily having the same tonality as Rogue One. So, it might appeal to you. It just depends. All right. So the number one thing that CBR.com was saying that we need to see, because, we had the other 10, right? So let me just do a real quick recap here. It's a good thing I had this article actually up. So, number 10 was we need to meet the Jedi survivor Cal Kestis. Again, as a recap, he is the main character in Jedi Fallen Order. There's a lot of canon information in Jedi Fallen Order, and it's a character that I think would actually do well, and I remember you agreed with that. Number 9, Black Chrysanthemum needs to make an appearance. This is another one where you and I agreed unanimously that yes, this needs to happen. There was a lot of dealings with Chrysanthemum and Obi-Wan. He fits really neatly into this time period, so I know you and I both agreed with that. The return of Quinlan Vos at number 8. We both agreed with that too, because, again, he was alluded to, kind of mentioned in season 1 of Obi-Wan, and it would be probably a disservice if they didn't expand that storyline in season 2. Again, it wouldn't be unheard of. I mean, people have done this all the time, where they've actually established something in a movie or in a story, and then they never explore it. And you're like, what are you doing? Number 7, Obi-Wan and the Takedown of Crimson Dawn. Another one that you and I both said probably needs to happen, because Crimson Dawn could be the main catalyst for storylines for an Obi-Wan Season 2. And you can weave that in with possible solo stories, too. Number 6, Return of Mace Windu. That was one where we were kind of like, I don't know about that.
Not so much.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm sort of
cool to see him again, but
yeah, and it would really have to be a compelling story. Like, you would really have to make that make sense. And then number 5, reuniting with an old friend, Commander Cody. We also said that should be a thing. Exploring the path, its past and future. Number 4, that was definitely something that was good. Number 3 was Obi-Wan reestablishing his connection to the Force. Again, you and I said he never should have lost it in the first place, so yes, that definitely needs to happen. Maybe we see a little bit more Qui-Gon. And then, of course, here we are at number 2 with Ahsoka dealing with Anakin's fall. It was one of those things that, hey, maybe Ahsoka and Obi-Wan can relate to both losing a dear friend. And then finally at number 1, we have the grudge between Maul and Kenobi. Now, of course, we already know that this played out a little bit in Rebels, and I believe the last season, where they showed an animated version of the Alec Guinness Obi-Wan, and they even had a different voice actor doing that, so it was a person who can almost perfectly imitate Alec Guinness. So we know that it happens a little bit closer to Episode 4, and again, it just shows how powerful Obi-Wan was. You have this whole build-up, and you saw all the trouble that Maul caused all the Jedi from Rebels. Well, there was like 2 of them. And then the crew of the Ghost and all this stuff, and, he was really powerful. Obi-Wan defeats him in like 5 seconds. I mean, he comes up, they have a little bit of a dialogue, Obi-Wan kills him instantly. That, just like they are planning, or at least it looks like they're planning on redoing the Ahsoka versus Vader duel from Rebels in Ahsoka, I wouldn't mind seeing at the end of season 2 a redo of the Maul and Obi Wan duel.
Do you still want it to be 5 seconds, or would you want it longer?
No, I'd like to see it play out exactly as it did, because one of the things that I thought when I saw that in Rebels, I'm like, man, I would love to see that in that context, right? In that situation. Because, I mean, other than maybe Palpatine taking out those initial Jedi Masters, we never see anything to where somebody's just so powerful, they just dispatch with them. And plus, I like that fitting into canon, right? So you can just port that over to live action and show it to us there.
I think between Maul and Kenobi, I think that's the building grudge. I mean, I think it would be cool to once again see Maul. I think everybody loves, Maul, especially if you go with the Crimson Dawn thing as the main antagonist in season 2. I think you will have to kind of show Maul kind of planning his, revenge on Kenobi. And yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that, then yeah, definitely give us that battle again. I mean, in a way, I kind of want to see a longer battle. I mean, I like the fact that Obi-Wan was so powerful like that, but at the same time, it's always good to see Maul being
well,
Maul.
But again, I mean, I think it,
but
and I mean, I get it.
It serves a story.
That's it. And I mean, the other problem is that it's kind of like, I think what you're talking about would be lessened if we saw more live action Maul in a Crimson Dawn storyline, right? So let's just say throughout season 2, because that's what we're talking about, is a perspective. It's like I can't talk anymore. A perspective season 2. One of the storylines that we said that was in this top 10 thing that we agree with is for them to utilize Crimson Dawn, have Maul be the head of it, and talk about how he loses out on it. And then at the end, and this could bleed into a possible season 3, because there's so many things that we brought up tonight from this article that you actually could do a season 3 of Obi-Wan. But just for the sake of argument, at the end of Obi-Wan, when you're done, when you know you're done and you're not going to do any more seasons, that would be the time to do this Obi-Wan Maul duel, and to keep it pretty much the way that it is. But hey, you guys should chat in and let us know what you guys think of that. Yeah, so I mean, overall, I think that actually this is a really good list, and this is a fun thing to do. I always like doing these top 10 lists. I always think that it's fun for you guys. It's fun for us to get into. It's something that we can really sink our teeth into and discuss. So we do plan to do more of these. We did have a top 10 bounty hunters at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But, this is a time where, of course, I remind everybody once again, if you haven't done so already, hit that like button. That's really important. It helps the channel, helps us grow, and helps us continue to be here every Monday and Friday at 8 o'clock. And hit the subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed, because we would love for you guys to be able to chat in with us. And you have to be a subscriber to chat in. So we'd love to have you guys doing that. So do you have any final thoughts about this list?
Not really. I mean, I think this is a fun thing. I think this is, like you said, it's always cool to hear other people's lists and kind of, analyze them and see what works for you and what doesn't. So this was a fun thing for you and I to do. I'm curious to see what you out there, may think about this and what your comments are. So that's pretty much it for me.
All right. Well, that's good, as usual, for you guys. Thanks, everybody who chatted in tonight. Thanks, everybody, for watching this live. And again, if you're watching the rebroadcast, or if you just want to get something else in here while we're still live, hit that comment section. Let us know what you guys think of this list. Let us know what was your favorite thing? Maybe you have your own top 10 list of things, or maybe you have something different or additional. Leave it all in the comment section. Because as we always say, we continue the discussion in the comments section. And also, this is something that I actually don't bring up that much, and I really should. In this endless advertising ourselves and plugging all of our stuff here, we are on Twitter and Facebook at head-to-head-SW. So, and we also on Facebook, we actually have a community group that's head-to-head a Star Wars community. So if you look for that, we post things. We always post what the next episode's going to be about, and we discuss. People like to discuss things. Maybe something happened in the show and they want to discuss it further. We do that. And we also do that in the comments section. So it doesn't have to end here, guys. We continue everything in the comments. Hit us up on our social media. Again, if you want to even take your support further, you can go to the buymeacoffee.com link that's in the comments, or I'm sorry, it's in the description of the show. And you can buy us a blue milk. You can make a one-time donation, or we do have some packages that you can, if you want to support us monthly, anything helps. So we're always happy to do that. And of course, we're always happy to talk to you guys about Star Wars every Monday and every Friday. So Monday night, 8 o'clock, we'll be live. Unless something else pops up, it'll probably be the Mandalorian Season 3 trailer. We'll see what we can do with that. So, till then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at head-to-head-SW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at head-to-head-swpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.